If you want to stop sabotaging relationships with women worth keeping, you need to understand something most men never even figure out. The version of you showing up in critical moments isn't the man you've become. It's a younger version still running survival strategies from decades ago. And until you learn to recognize when that version has taken control, you'll keep destroying good relationships without even understanding why. So in this video, I'm going to break through the exact mechanism behind relationship sabotage, why just communicating better doesn't fix it, and the specific integration work or shadow work required to stop the pattern permanently. Alright, so I want you to imagine this scenario. You are 3 months into the best relationship you've ever had with a woman. She's everything you would have hoped for. She's emotionally invested, she's physically attractive, and she genuinely respects you. And you're sitting across from her at dinner, and she says something completely off the cuff, like, "What time are you coming over tomorrow?" And the moment it registers, you feel the sort of anger flash through your chest, right? And in the heat of the moment, for whatever reason, you just snap back at her. And as things start to escalate and you start arguing, this kind of loop starts to emerge that you find yourself trapped in, where she kind of pulls back, then you feel embarrassed and you withdraw. And before you know it, this kind of distance starts to replace your intimacy. And certain seeds of doubt start to be planted in your mind and also hers. And after a few months of walking or moving in circles, she completely shuts off emotionally. It's like you've hit a patch of black ice and you feel the car starts to slide. So you overcorrect the wheel, and that actually makes it worse. So you overcorrect the other way, and now you're just kind of fishtailing, and each move you make to fix it just sends you spinning harder in the opposite direction. And by the time you realize what's happening, you drive yourself in a ditch and you can't even reconstruct the exact sequence of moves that actually put you there. But here's what's actually happened. She asked a question about making plans, but the version of you that heard it wasn't your adult self. It was the part of you that's still 8 years old, getting interrogated by your mother about where you've been and feeling like you're about to get in trouble for something you didn't do. You didn't respond to her question. You just defended yourself against a threat that wasn't even there. So you're basically shadow boxing with a ghost. The opponent left the ring 20 years ago, but your body's still throwing punches at where it used to stand. And every time someone gets close to you, your nervous system sees that old threat and goes into defense, completely unaware that the danger is long gone. And most men recognize this pattern only when looking in the rearview mirror after they've completely blown another potential relationship or just made terrible choices when the opportunity actually called for it. Now, the pattern is obvious when you're looking back, but it's unfortunately invisible when you're in it. And this isn't about communication skills. Not at all. Everybody knows that staying calm and not being defensive and taking time to listen is not a bad idea. But when she's upset or she's testing your patience, something else takes over. You either shut down, explode, or just find reasons why she's not the one for you. The cost of this isn't just about relationships. The exact same pattern shows up at work when your boss gives you constructive feedback, and it also drives your syndrome crazy. It also shows up with friends when conflict means disappearing for weeks on end. It literally shows up in every context where someone gets close enough to trigger those wounds you've been carrying since childhood. You've built the external indicators of success like career, money, fitness, but internally you're operating from a broken foundation. And no amount of tactical self-improvement can fix what's fundamentally a deeper problem. You might really believe that you're broken, weak, or just flat out bad at relationships. But you see, that's the other extreme, and it's totally false. It's just that nobody ever taught you that your emotional reactions are being run by a version of you from 20 years ago. And that version is still to this day trying to protect you from a danger that no longer exists. So if the problem isn't tactics or communication skills, then what is it? And why does every strategy you've tried fail the moment real pressure actually hits? That's what this next part of this video is going to break down. The neurobiological reality that you find yourself in. And listen, your brain cannot tell the difference between your girlfriend is upset and you are in physical danger. This isn't meant to be a metaphor. It's just how neurobiology works. When you were a child and your father criticized you, or your mother withdrew affection, or your emotions were ignored, your nervous system interpreted that as a survival threat. A child is completely dependent on caregivers. If they withdrew love, the child's brain says, I might not survive. So your amygdala, the brain's threat detector, learned that kind of pattern, that vulnerability equals danger. So emotional exposure equals potential abandonment. And needing someone means you might sooner or later be hurt. And that pattern got encoded at the biological level early on. Now, here's the critical part. Your amygdala doesn't update its threat assessment based on your current circumstances. It's still running the same alarm system it installed when you were 7 or 8 years old. So when she says, we need to talk, or she challenges your decision, or expresses emotions you don't know how to handle, your body just floods. Your heart rate spikes upwards of 100 beats per minute, and your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that knows how to stay present and lead the conversation, goes totally offline. And what's left in control is what psychology calls the adaptive child, or the wounded boy. The part of you that learned specific survival strategies in childhood to deal with specific circumstances. Now, if criticism meant you were in danger, you learned to get defensive or withdraw before the criticism could land. If emotions meant chaos, you learned to shut down or fix the problem immediately. If needing someone meant they'd abandon you, you learned to stay hyper-independent and never ask for help. These strategies kept you safe then, but in relationships, they destroyed connection and intimacy. You have to think of your psyche like a boardroom with 3 people at the table. The first of those people is the critical parent. This is the internalized voice of whoever judged you. You're not good enough. You should know better. Why can't you just get it right? They're literally like demons whispering in the background. The second person in the boardroom is the wounded boy. This is the version of you still trying to survive the childhood environment. It's literally the part of you that shuts down when she gets emotional or needs further reassurance on something. And the last person in the boardroom is the wise man. This is the part of you that exists in the present, sees reality clearly and can respond with integrity rather than reactivity. And listen, most relationship sabotage happens because you're having what's called a crossed transaction, where she may be speaking from the better part of herself, while you may be responding from the wounded part of yourself. So imagine she's asking you from the third person, the wise adult, in the boardroom, and she asks something like, did you see my message about dinner plans, for example? And what you're going to do, you're going to respond from the second person in the boardroom, which is the wounded boy. And what you hear is the critical parent saying, you're irresponsible, you forgot again, you keep messing it all up, and so on and so forth. So what you do is you're going to react from the defensive boy. Why are you always so petty? Why do you keep pushing it? And here's the thing. Now you're fighting about something completely different, about tone, and not talking about the deeper problem that's creating a disconnect. So as you might expect, nothing gets resolved because you're not even in the same conversation. She's talking about planning and you're defending yourself against an accusation she never even made. This is the hijack mechanism. Your nervous system takes over before your rational mind even has a chance to process what's actually happening. And you can't tell someone to just communicate better in the situation because when your nervous system is flooded, you can't access those communication skills. It's not a willpower problem. It's a biological state problem. And you can't outthink a nervous system response. You can't force yourself to stay calm when your body is already on fight or flight mode. You can't use rational strategies when the part of your brain that does rational thinking has gone offline. That's why proper inner work is never about learning better communication tactics first. It's about regulating your nervous system, your ego state awareness, and updating the childhood template that's running invisibly in the background. Most men are just trying to fix the symptoms with tactics, but that's merely externalizing the problem. So if tactics don't work because the problem is neurobiological, then what does work, right? That's what we're discussing in the next section, and the exact practices that interrupt this pattern at the level where it actually operates. And the solution is certainly not to therapize the problem and spend 10 years trying to understand your patterns, or shallow, just be more confident bro code that requires you to constantly perform someone you are not. The actual solution is interrupting the pattern at the somatic level, the ego state awareness, and actually reprogramming the wounded boy within you with the right intentions. And there's 4 tangible pillars to this system. Let's look at the first pillar, which is recognizing the hijack in real time. Your first job is developing the consciousness to notice when the wounded boy, and by the wounded boy I mean the adaptive child who is trying to survive, has taken control before you impulsively sabotage yourself. And the question is simple. When you feel an unreasonable emotional reaction, you have to pause and literally ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? If the answer is, I feel like I'm 8 years old and someone just yelled at me, or I feel like I'm 12 and my mom is ignoring me, that's quite literally the message. Even though it sounds absolutely childish when you hear it back, this little boy within you is at odds with the present emotion. The simple act of labeling the inner child state activates your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that went offline during that flooding. Naming it, this is my 10-year-old self reacting, for example, creates enough psychological distance for the wise man, the third person in the boardroom, within you to step back into the picture. Now, you're not suppressing the emotion. You're not pretending it isn't there or anything like that. You're just recognizing which part of you is driving and consciously choosing to take the wheel back. Now, the tactical practice for building the awareness is what I call the anger log, where for 2 weeks you document every instance where you felt triggered. You literally write down the factual event. So she asked what time I'd be home, for example. Secondly, the physical sensation, for example, heat in my face, tightness in my chest. Thirdly, the automatic thought, she thinks I'm irresponsible. Fourth is the behavior, so snapped at her or withdrew attention all evening, and so forth. And fifth is the age check. I felt like I was 10 years old getting interrogated by my mother or my father, for example. This practice alone creates what I call observer distance, where you move from I am angry to I notice that the wounded part of me is in control in this present moment. And the shift from being in the emotion to observing the emotion is the first layer of integration, because you can't change a pattern you can't see. And most men can't see the pattern or influence it until they start tracking it systematically. And awareness alone can't possibly affect change. The second pillar is mastering the physiological breaks. So because the hijack is biological before it's psychological, you need somatic techniques that work faster than just talk therapy. And when you feel physical sensations kicking in, like a burst of warmth, the urge to walk away or to explode in anger, you need a way to physically signal to your brain that the danger has passed. And the first tool to help you immensely with that is the VU sound, where you take a deep breath and exhale with a long and low VU sound, and you let it vibrate in your chest for 10 to 15 seconds. What this does is it stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the primary communication channel between your brain on the one hand and your body on another. And this vibration sends a physical signal that danger has passed and that we're safe, right? So your heart rate starts to drop and your prefrontal cortex comes back online. And then the wise man enters the picture once again. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, right? I'm not really into these spiritual practices. I'm above all this guru stuff. It's all nonsense and so on. And listen, I totally get it. I genuinely do. Because when I first learned about this for myself, I had like a lot of skepticism around it and thought these spiritual practices are just being promoted by charlatans who just want to brainwash people. But after experimenting with it extensively and doing my own research and case studies, I realized something completely different. It isn't spiritual. It's more neurobiological, because the vagus nerve is your body's reset button, literally. And most men don't even know it exists. So before you set it aside and think it's all bollocks, give it a shot and Just see for yourself. Now, the second tool is box breathing. And box breathing is very simple. It's 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out, and then 4 counts hold again. And you repeat this for 2 to 3 minutes. And this regulates your autonomic nervous system, and it pulls you out of this fight or flight mode and back into what psychologists call the window of tolerance. This is the state where you can actually experience emotions without becoming flooded or just flat out shutting down. Now, the third tool is the structured timeout. So if you're too emotionally involved to speak without sabotaging, don't try to fake your way through it. Instead, you should implement a timeout with integrity, because you can say something like, listen, I'm annoyed right now and I can't give this my full attention. I just need 20 minutes. I'll come back at this specific time so we can finish this conversation. What this does, it honors your nervous system's need for space while reassuring her she's not being abandoned, because that's the key distinction that prevents her attachment alarm from going off. And remember, stonewalling destroys relationships because it feels like abandonment for a lot of people. But structured timeouts are not stonewalling. It's basically taking responsibility for your inner state and committing to a return when the time feels right. That's what leadership is all about. Now, the difference between a boy and a man isn't that the man never gets emotional. It's that the man has the tools to regulate himself and return to the conversation from a grounded state instead of reacting from a broken one. Now, let's move into the third pillar, which is shifting from blame to inner work. Now, think about this, right? Sabotage thrives on projection. The boy externalizes his pain onto his partner, like, you're too emotional, you're too demanding, you don't respect me. But integration requires bringing that pain inside and speak from it directly so that you give it a voice and prevent it from dictating your behavior. And the formula to do so is very simple. You articulate it in a way that demonstrates awareness and maturity. When factual event happens, I experience X emotion because I have a need for this core longing, right? Would you be willing to, and you insert your specific request. Now, you don't have to overly emotionalize this or become a train wreck in the process. That's what all these men get wrong, is that they think it's like, it has to be overly emotionalized and it becomes this completely different thing. The point is to give it a voice so that you're on the same page and you don't seem closed off to her, because that's only going to create distance between you and her. It's not to search for sympathy or validation either. A lot of men out there have a certain paranoia around expressing their inner world to women. But listen, that says more about their character and the partner they chose than the practice itself. Because hear me out, the right woman will want to create this kind of space for you without you having to ask her. But you need to have the foundations laid down first. And by doing this, you're providing a rational, secure perspective your actual parents didn't give you. And over time, if you do this right, it becomes automatic. You stop needing to consciously remind yourself to do it, because the wise man within you becomes your default operating system instead of the wounded boy. The fourth pillar is to stop outsourcing your safety. Now, the deepest sabotage pattern is expecting your partner to heal the wounds your parents left behind, right? So when you seek constant validation, when you need her to reassure you you're good enough, when you monitor her moods to determine your emotional state, you're asking her to be the father who validates you or the mother who makes you feel safe. But she can't do that. And deliberately asking her to will just destroy the relationship. Integration means becoming the protector and validator you needed as a boy. But you do it for yourself. The practice is a daily self-check-in. Every morning, before you reach for your phone or check if she texted, spend 10 minutes with yourself. Just sit, feel your feet on the ground, and literally affirm to yourself, I see, I've got us. I will not abandon you. Your worth doesn't depend on anyone's approval. This is genuine self-fathering. You're providing the secure base internally, so you don't need to extract it from her. If this feels ridiculous or uncomfortable, I get it, because that's the wound. The boy totally mocks vulnerability at all costs because he learned it was dangerous even in measured doses. The man does the uncomfortable work because he knows it's necessary, and most men can't do this without feeling absurd. But think about it, that feeling is diagnostic. It's showing you exactly where the wound lives. But when you provide your own secure base for yourself, you stop needing to sabotage your partner to maintain your autonomy. You can be close and intimate without losing yourself. You can be selectively vulnerable without breaking down. You can meet her in useful ways without making her responsible for your entire emotional state. The boy needs her to complete him, but the man is already whole. Think about that. So, those are the 4 pillars. You have awareness, regulation, ownership, and self-fathering. But integration isn't just internal work. It also has to prove itself in how you actually show up in relationships. And that's what this next section is about. When you do this work, things are going to change. And here's how it's ultimately work. Before integration, you're probably going to be stuck in a loop where she gets emotional and you shut down or you try to fix it or some variation of that. She's going to test your frame and you're going to, get defensive. You're going to collapse. You're going to react in anger. What you're also going to do is, as intimacy increases, you're going to find flaws and you're going to create distance. You're going to criticize. You're going to do all of that. Or when she needs reassurance, you're going to resent or push away that side of herself. And after you've done the inner work, hopefully by sticking to the system, right? When she gets emotional, you're going to stay present and you're going to observe without trying to prescribe or fix. And when she tests your frame, you're going to hold it calmly because you have no need to prove. When intimacy increases, you're not going to pull away because your nervous system can actually handle it. And when she needs reassurance, you can provide it without resentment because you're not depleted or anxious or constantly on edge. The proof isn't just in your head. It's also in how she responds to you, because women have extremely accurate nervous system detectors. She can feel when you're regulated versus when you're just performing. She can sense when you're grounded versus when you're just compensating. And when you do the proper shadow work, she can truly relax around you. She trusts your relationship without you even demanding it. She respects you without you having to enforce it. And she can open up to you emotionally because she feels safe around you. This is the distinction most men really miss, is that you can't fake this in any possible way. You can't perform groundedness. You can't strategically pretend to be regulated. She'll feel the gap between what you're projecting and what you actually are sooner or later. Integration closes that gap entirely. You have to think of it like a tuning fork. When you're integrated and the wise man is genuinely running the show instead of the wounded boy just performing manhood, she resonates with that frequency automatically. You're no longer trying to control her behavior. You're simply regulating yourself, and she is naturally responding to it. That's the difference between tactics on the one hand and transformation. Tactics are about controlling outcomes. Transformation is more about becoming the man who doesn't need to control outcomes because his internal state is solid enough regardless of her behavior. Healing the wound isn't soft work. It's actually the hardest, most integrity-driven work you can possibly do, because the boy runs from his wounds and expects the world to accommodate them. The genuine man faces his wounds. He integrates them and he takes responsibility for showing up regulated, present, and secure. Now, this isn't about, becoming psychologically perfect. You'll still get triggered and the boy doesn't just disappear, but you develop the capacity to recognize when he's activated and choose the mature response instead of the automatic sabotage patterns. And the fundamental difference between boys and men is that men have done the work to integrate their wounds and the darker parts of their character, whereas most men spend their entire lives compensating for their wounds without ever addressing them. They build careers to prove they're worthy. They pursue women to prove they're desirable. They accumulate status to prove they matter. But none of it works because external validation can't heal an internal wound. The only thing that works is turning inward, seeing the boy clearly, and providing him with the safety and eventually the validation that he never got. And you're not going to get that from her. That only can come from you. That's what it fundamentally means to become a man. Now, if you're listening to this and you're recognizing your patterns, whether that's shutdown, defensiveness, validation seeking, push pull, or sabotage right when things get good, you're just running an outdated operating system that made perfect sense in childhood, but is not going to work in contemporary relationships. This is what masculine development actually means. It's not performing strength or faking confidence. It's none of that. It's just doing the internal work that makes both of those things real. Now, if you want help identifying your specific sabotage patterns and doing this integration work with proper guidance, I offer a 30-minute free strategy call. You can click the first link in my bio. We'll diagnose what broken patterns are happening within your life, what wounds are running your relationships, and show you exactly what needs to change. You can click the first link in my bio. And of course, if this resonated, let me know your thoughts below. If you have any questions, please let me know. And until then, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.